By 2050, space travel has become as common as taking a flight. A company called Ambercop sends ships to mine distant planets and capture alien creatures to serve as food for Earth. There's a legend about a mystical place called White Space, a realm free of disease, pain, and suffering, where anyone can be purified. But no one has ever reached it because it's guarded by a massive creature named Tien Lung. One fateful day, two space hunters encounter Tien Lung. Captain Bentley fires his weapon, but the shot is blocked by Tien Lung's mate, her tough scales shielding her. Hawthorne, the other hunter, steps out in a special suit, finds the mate's weak spot, and kills her. Enraged, Tien Lung turns on Hawthorne. Bentley tries to shoot again but misses, and as a strange bright light flashes behind the ship, Tien Lung attacks, destroying the vessel and killing Bentley. 24 years later, a woman named Lynn rides her bike to a restaurant but stops outside, unable to enter due to a guard at the door. Lynn works for ICE, Interstellar Conservation Enforcement. Inside, Bentley's son Richard meets a shady businessman who owns a creepy alien creature called Crazy Bug, kept in a glass container. The man offers Richard a map marking every sighting of Tien Lung over the years, promising a hefty reward for capturing the creature. Suddenly, the guard interrupts, warning them that ICE is watching. Suspecting a trap, the businessman accuses Richard of setting him up. Chaos breaks out. The guard grabs Richard by the neck, and the businessman tries to force the crazy bug into Richard's ear. Richard fights back, stabbing the guard with a fork. The businessman smashes a chair over Richard's back and starts beating him. Richard tackles him onto a table and punches him relentlessly. Desperate, the businessman grabs a broken bottle, but Richard slams his face toward the crazy bug. The bug crawls up the man's nose, causing him agonizing pain. With the guards distracted, Richard grabs the map and escapes. Lynn, watching from the shadows, quietly leaves as well. 3 months later, Lynn prepares for an undercover mission aboard the Essex spaceship. Her records have been erased to make her look like a mining and fishing escort with a supply order. Her colleagues whisper about her belief in the white space legend, doubting her. On board the Essex, Lynn meets the ship's captain, none other than Richard. His brother Owen shows her around, introducing her to the crew. There's the ship's cook, Bartoli, who warns Lynn to stay away from her boyfriend Harpo. Lynn also notices an old cryopod repurposed as a fridge in the kitchen. Among the crew is a now aged and broken Hawthorne, who turned into a heavy drinker after Bentley's death. Later, Lynn spends time in her room, working on her personal computer. Her profile pops up first, revealing she has a tumor and only 6 months left to live. She then checks the intel her boss sent, discovering that every crew member has a criminal past, so she has to stay cautious. A little later, Hawthorne, Harpo, and Owen suit up in their special gear to hunt creatures called clickers. Lynn asks a lot of questions during the mission, which Richard finds odd since fishing escorts are supposed to know these things. The team uses a rock to lure the smaller clickers, which immediately follow it into the container. However, the big clicker refuses to cooperate and floats away when they shoot at it. Owen breaks formation and chases it, ignoring the others' warnings. The big clicker hides in an asteroid, and Owen follows it through a different tunnel. Suddenly, a bright white light flashes, knocking him unconscious. Soon, something massive shows up on the radar, so Hawthorne and Harpo rush to get the container into the ship. Richard fires a harpoon that attaches to the asteroid, hoping Owen can hold onto it once he wakes up. As Owen moves around, he hits his head and starts to move slowly. To his shock, Tien Lung appears nearby. Owen fires a tracker that sticks to the beast's scales. The crew watches as Tien Lung flies away, then reels Owen back into the ship, just as Tien Lung disappears into the bright light. At dinner, Lynn talks about a ship that disappeared while trying to track Tien Lung, suggesting it might have found the white space. She believes there could be white holes, just like black holes, which might lead to an exit. The crew laughs, dismissing it as a fairy tale. Lynn then suggests they follow Owen's tracker through the white space, which could lead to a bigger catch, but Richard disagrees. He says they've been fishing for months and it's time to go home. Afterward, it's revealed that Harpo has been cheating on Bartoli with the ship's pilot, Rags Land. Later, Harpo approaches Richard, asking to go for the bigger catch Lynn mentioned, since he needs the money. Richard explains he doesn't want Lynn watching them, so they'll finish the current order, drop her off, and then go after the big load. Meanwhile, Lynn sneaks into the comms room and sends a message to ICE, unaware that her transmission is intercepted. A few hours later, Richard watches a recording from Bentley about Tien Lung and remembers the day his father gave him a sword. He's interrupted by Ragsland on the radio, who reports 2 small unidentified ships are approaching. Richard rushes to the cockpit and orders Ragsland to fly away to lose them. But the ships quickly block their path. Realizing they're pirates, the crew has no choice but to let them board to avoid a confrontation. They hide Ragsland and Bartoli in a secret compartment, while Richard places a beacon on the cargo. He also orders everyone to hide their weapons, hoping to avoid trouble. When the pirates board, they immediately start harassing Lynn. Owen tries to defend her, but a short struggle ends with Owen's leg getting slashed. The pirate captain pushes Lynn against the wall. She starts quoting penal codes, which makes the captain suspicious. He checks under her shirt and finds her badge. The pirates steal all the cargo and supplies and put a tracker on the Essex before leaving. The crew angrily scolds Lynn, realizing her report must have drawn the pirates' attention. A furious Richard orders Harpo to lock her in her room. Afterward, the crew discusses their next move, realizing they only have 2 small bags of food left. The crew's chances of finishing the fishing order are slim without supplies, but they can't return empty-handed. Richard proposes they go after Tien Lung, thinking its head will bring enough money for an early retirement. Everyone agrees, but first, they need to catch a few clickers for food. Soon, Owen checks in on Lynn and asks her why she's on the ship. Lynn explains she's been tracking Tien Lung, and the Essex is the only ship following its course. Owen realizes Richard has been chasing Tien Lung all along and goes to confront him. Richard admits it's all about revenge for their father. Owen is furious, accusing Richard of using the crew for his personal vendetta without their consent. Before things escalate, the ship's front window is hit with ambergris, a valuable substance. Richard thinks Tien Lung is leaving a trail, but Owen insists it's just bait. Meanwhile, Harpo and Ragsland get up to their usual trouble, and Bartoli finds Ragsland's bra after their rendezvous. Later, the crew heads out in their special suits to collect ambergris and capture a huge clicker. But just as they're working, the pirates appear again to steal everything. Richard curses when he realizes they've found his beacon. They need the hyperdrive to escape, but they discover the pirates have damaged it too. Stubbs, the mechanic, starts working on a fix, while Richard orders the crew back to the ship. But Harpo decides to stay and capture the clicker first. The pirates start firing, and though the Essex has a protective force field, it won't last long. Richard orders Ragsland to release the waste chambers, ignoring that Harpo is still outside. Harpo dodges the chambers and rushes back to the Essex with the clicker. The waste chambers hit one pirate ship, but the other still threatens them. When the pirate captain fires missiles that could destroy the Essex, Stubbs finally repairs the hyperdrive, and the ship escapes at hyperspeed. Once they're safe, the crew confronts Richard for getting rid of their beacon. Harpo is especially angry. Richard points out that Harpo ignored orders, but Harpo retorts that he saved everyone's lives by capturing food. The tension builds, and Richard shoves him. Hawthorne intervenes before things get out of hand. Meanwhile, Stubbs, while cleaning the ambergris off their suits, notices the lock on the clicker crate is open. As he's about to close it, he feels tiny bugs crawling on his hand, biting him. The bugs start sneaking under his clothes, and he begins panicking, trying to get them off. In the chaos, he forgets the crate is still unlocked. Stubbs rushes to the bathroom, trying to wash the bugs off, but soon realizes they've gotten inside his body. When he returns to his room, he starts hearing voices and goes mad, screaming at the walls. Later, at dinner, Bartoli reveals to Harpo that she's pregnant. Harpo freaks out at the idea of raising a kid and decides to steal some ambergris, hiding it in the fridge. Meanwhile, Richard checks in on Lynn, who expresses her opposition to killing Tien Lung. She won't explain why, so Richard ignores her argument. After he leaves, Lin manages to break the lock on her room and sneaks out. In the shadows of the corridor, someone sabotages the oxygen reserves. Lin tries to be quiet, but Harpo catches her. She immediately fights back and overpowers him, thanks to her agent training. Just then, Stubbs sees what's happening and screams, distracting Lin. Harpo takes advantage of this and knocks her out with a tool. When she wakes up, Lin finds herself locked in the cargo bay. She overhears Harpo telling Richard she was the one messing with the oxygen reserves. Meanwhile, Ragsland is asleep in the cockpit and misses the strange signal that briefly appeared on the screen. Bartoli later brings Lin food, and Lin offers her a way to escape, but Bartoli refuses to help. After Bartoli leaves, Lin hears the clicker screeching in its crate. Ragsland and Richard also hear strange noises echoing through the ship. They check the scanner and discover dozens of destroyed ships around them, likely caused by Tien Lung. In the vents, Stubbs is carving soap with a knife. Later, Richard tells Hawthorne it was Harpo who tampered with the oxygen. Hawthorne suggests that desperate people do crazy things, hinting that Richard may have let the pirate steal from them on purpose to catch Tien Lung. Richard ignores the comment and mentions that Stubbs needs to fix the oxygen, but nobody can find him. In the cargo bay, the clicker escapes its crate and attacks Lin. She throws boxes to slow it down and yells for help. Luckily, Richard hears her and opens the door to rescue her, using a fire extinguisher to fend off the creature. But the extinguisher doesn't work, and the clicker chases them down the corridor. Richard and Lin manage to hide in the airlock, but the clicker catches up, grabbing Lin's leg. Just in time, Richard releases a crate, crushing the clicker to death. Afterward, Owen refuses to lock Lin up again, and Richard tells him she'll be his responsibility. An argument erupts, with Owen accusing Richard of being just like their father, who abandoned the family to hunt Tien Lung. Enraged, Richard pushes Owen against the wall, calling him nothing like their father. Owen storms off to the comms room and sends a distress message, but the pirates intercept it. Meanwhile, Harpo and Ragsland sneak off again, and Harpo wants to go home, trying to get Ragsland to side with him, but Ragsland refuses to betray Richard. Moments later, Richard spots a white hole, and Tien Lung appears, crashing into the Essex with tremendous force. The ship shakes, and the force field is down to 50% strength. Owen dons his suit and heads out to hunt Tien Lung. Richard orders Hawthorne and Harpo to join him. Owen dodges the creature's attacks while trying to guide it toward an asteroid belt. He shoots a rope at a nearby asteroid and uses the momentum to swing around it, landing on Tien Lung's back. As he opens fire, the creature bends its body to throw him off. Hawthorne tries to get closer to help Owen, but in doing so, he's struck by Tien Lung. Owen opens fire again, but Tien Lung strikes him, sending him into a tailspin. Owen crashes into an asteroid, sustaining a severe head injury that leaves him bleeding heavily. He apologizes to Richard for failing, but Richard, uncaring, shouts at his crew to keep moving so he can take a shot with his harpoon. In that moment, Lin disables Richard's aiming system, prompting him to knock her out with a punch. Outside, Tien Lung grabs Owen and crushes him before activating the bright light to vanish. Soon after, Harpo speaks with Ragsland in secret, expressing that Richard has gone too far. He points out that the oxygen levels are dangerously low, and Ragsland starts to consider mutiny as their only option. When Lin wakes up, Richard tells her they've reached the location where Bentley died. He had hoped that this journey would bring him closer to his father, but instead, he's lost his brother. He wants to return to Earth because they no longer have the oxygen to keep exploring. However, Lin insists on finding Stubbs to fix it. As they move down the corridor, they hear noises from the vents. Suddenly, some goo falls to the floor, and Lin spots parasites within it. She realizes that Stubbs must be infected. While she believes there's still a chance to help him, she needs a way to defend herself. Richard agrees to give her a sword, but Lin only accepts under one condition: if she helps Stubbs, they'll continue hunting Tien Lung instead of returning to Earth. The pirate ship soon locates them, and the white hole opens again, bringing Tien Lung along. Ragsland notices they're heading into a storm and urges Richard to turn back, but he insists on pushing forward since the pirates won't follow them into the storm. Tien Lung then creates colorful waves, which disable the Essex's power source. The ship slows down, and the force field drops to 20%. As Ragsland searches for a solution, Tien Lung reappears next to the pirates and damages their ship. The pirate pilot opens fire from the inside, and the captain takes a shuttle to shoot from a different angle. The pirate weapons do little to harm Tien Lung, who swiftly destroys both ships before vanishing into another white hole. On the Essex, Ragsland tries to override the AI to regain manual control, but things are becoming increasingly desperate. In Harpo's room, he discusses his plan for mutiny with Bartoli, but she refuses to join forces with Ragsland. Harpo reminds her that neither of them can pilot the ship and that they'll need her to escape. After some hesitation, she agrees to help for the sake of the baby. Meanwhile, Richard inspects the power source of the ship and discovers that Stubbs has sabotaged it. As this happens, Tien Lung appears again, throwing the damaged pirate ship at the Essex, causing even more damage. In response, Ragsland activates the thrusters and takes the Essex into the storm, hoping to escape the creature. As the pirate ship rolls over the Essex, Richard manages to repair the power source, restoring the ship's speed enough to evade further danger. In a dark corridor, Lynn confronts Stubbs, and after a brief struggle, she cuts off his hand, forcing him to retreat. Stubbs hides in the tool closet, using a torch to close his wound. Meanwhile, Ragsland finishes her bath and grabs her clothes from the locker, only to find the carved soap. Before she can react, Stubbs pushes her against the lockers and stabs her. He then heads to the kitchen, where Bartoli tries to defend herself with a pot. However, Stubbs quickly overpowers her and corners her, ignoring her pleas about the baby before stabbing her. Lynn rushes in to attack Stubbs, but he kicks her down. Bartoli, using the distraction, manages to hit him with the pot. As Stubbs turns around, Lynn decapitates him with the sword, but Bartoli succumbs to her injuries. In the cockpit, Richard and Hawthorne detect Tien Lung's signal again. Richard rushes to suit up, narrowly avoiding Harpo's plan to attack him. Outside, Richard opens fire to get Tien Lung's attention, and the creature begins chasing him. Richard flies close to the ship, giving Hawthorne a clear shot at launching the harpoon. Just as the harpoon locks onto Tien Lung, the ship's systems fail, and the AI warns the crew to evacuate. Hawthorne tries to reach the escape pod, but Harpo blocks him, intent on escaping with his girlfriend. A fierce fight ensues, and while Hawthorne shows impressive moves for his age, Harpo's strength overwhelms him. Just as Harpo is about to kill him, Hawthorne activates his suit, firing a harpoon that instantly kills Harpo. Meanwhile, Tien Lung continues to chase Richard, causing more damage each time his massive body collides with the Essex. Richard insists on continuing the fight, but Tien Lung eventually captures and crushes him. When Hawthorne emerges from his suit, he watches in horror as Tien Lung kills Richard and then flies into the Essex, causing an explosion. In a desperate move, Lynn hides in the fridge, which was once a cryopod, and activates the freezing sequence. The pod is ejected from the Essex and is pulled into the white hole Tien Lung creates to depart. As the chaos unfolds, a rescue ship arrives in response to Owen's SOS message, rescuing a stunned Hawthorne. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.